Hi, my name is Sakari Tolppanen and I'm a researcher at the University of Helsinki. And I really want to warmly welcome you to this course on sustainable energy. During this course you'll learn about energy from many different perspectives, and so in my lecture I'm actually going to focus more on education on environmental issues in general. So the primary focus won't be on energy, because a lot of these principles involved in environmental education can be transferred from different themes to another. And so I'm going to focus on some of the challenges as well as the opportunities of environmental education, and I hope that you as a professional can constantly keep energy at the back of your mind and think how you can apply these things to education on energy, and specifically on sustainable energy. So the content of my talk will mainly be on what type of pedagogical content knowledge should a teacher have when addressing environmental issues. I will use climate change as a case in many of the issues, and of course climate change is strongly linked to energy issues, so you will definitely see a clear connection there. I will look briefly at how should environmental issues be approached in education regardless of what age your students are, and what type of misconceptions teachers may have on how their students learn about environmental issues and what are the things that should be addressed in class. So I'm sure you're quite familiar with the term sustainable development, but just to briefly look into the theme, when we talk about sustainable development, we're talking about creating a world where future generations can strive in as well. So we're not only thinking short-term about our own lives, but we're thinking long-term. How can we make this planet sustainable? And there's been different models that have been drawn about sustainable development, and here you will see one of them. In this model we have environmental issues on the outside, and this puts the focus on the outside, saying that environmental issues are key. If we don't consider environmental issues, we won't have a society, we won't have an economy. And this quite well depicts what sustainable development is about, but as with all models, there's limitations as well. So a model that's maybe more common to you is this one. Here you see that in the center of these three circles we have sustainable development. So we have to simultaneously consider environmental issues, social or societal issues, and economic issues. If we don't manage to consider all of these three, we won't actually reach sustainable development. We might be able to thrive, we might be able to survive, but we won't really thrive. And so now when I'm talking about environmental education, I'm also talking about education for sustainable development. How can we help our students create a world where sustainable development or sustainability is the norm? So when we look at sustainable development and environmental education, of course, especially from this model, we see that, well, these circles don't necessarily always overlap the same way that they do in this picture. In reality, we actually live in a world where economic aspects have been overvalued for the past decades, maybe the past centuries, whereas environmental issues have sort of been put to the side and not so much focus has been on those. And this has gradually started to change, but this change is still under progress, and we aren't yet sure what would be the best change, which direction to take. And that brings us to the next issue, which is wicked problems. And a wicked problem is something where there is no simple solutions because there's so many things that affect the problem. And climate change is a primary example of this. When we think of climate change, we know that, okay, we need to cut our emissions. We need to reduce our fossil fuel consumption, and we can do that by shutting down factories or decreasing our energy consumption. We can stop using coal, we can stop using fossil fuels. But as you know, the problem isn't as simple as this. Because if we stop using our cars, we won't have food in our stores. What will we eat? If we don't produce energy the way we're used to producing it through fossil fuels, our energy prices will go up significantly, because currently we don't have enough sustainable energy sources, and the sustainable energy production that we do have isn't yet at the same price level as some of the old energy production methods such as fossil fuels. And so, of course, if the price of energy goes up, that means that more people will be using their money on energy, such as heating their homes, driving their cars. That will lead to them using less money on other things, such as services. And this will, of course, then lead to more people being unemployed, and that's how the circle just keeps going. Everything is connected to everything, and that's why climate change is a wicked problem, and that is also strongly linked to why energy and energy policy is so hard, and it seems to move forward so slowly, because there's so many issues and aspects that need to be considered at the same time. So, of course, with energy issues and especially climate change, we need to bring different nations around the same table to discuss what is the direction we as a human race need to go towards. But here, of course, the challenge is that people come from different countries, they come from different backgrounds, they come from different economic situations, come from different societal situations. And so even though we have that same common goal, we might not see that goal the same. For some, they might think that this goal needs to be reached as soon as possible, whereas for others, they don't think that the environmental problems that they will face will be so dramatic that they have to pursue that goal quite as fast as some other countries are suggesting. So even though we have the same goal, as is in this picture, we're actually looking at it from very different perspectives. Some maybe from closer and some from further away. But not only that, we don't only have one goal, but simultaneously countries are aiming at many different goals. They want to increase unemployment, they want to increase their wealth, and so forth. And so there's many different issues that are at play when talking about issues such as energy policy. What would be the best direction to take? And so it's in essence a bridge that we're building, but we're not quite there yet. We're in a transition phase, and this transition phase can often feel like a mist. We don't really know where we're going, which way we should go, and how fast we should go. And that is what a wicked problem is in essence. And I find that it's very important that teachers understand this, understand the complexity of the problem that we are actually dealing with, and take this into consideration in their own teaching, so we don't focus on giving students simple truths, but give them the focus or the understanding of how complex of an issue we're dealing with, yet at the same time focusing on how we can tackle the problems that we're facing. So to look at what a wicked problem is in essence or in whole, we see from this list that the problem is something that we typically don't understand until after we have a solution. So only after we've solved the problem, we really see what the true problem is. Of course, we see bits and pieces of the problem that we're facing, but we don't understand all the different aspects of the problem. Also, there's no stopping rules. So once the problem has started going and rolling, we can't turn back in time, but we just have to face the consequences. And the challenge is that when talking about wicked problems such as climate change related to energy policy, is that we don't really have any right and wrong answers. We have better solutions, we have worse solutions, but we typically don't know the best and the worst solutions up front. And so a wicked problem in essence is also something that we've never faced before. So, of course, there's bits and pieces that we can learn from the previous environmental problems that we've had, such as ozone depletion and acid rain, but at the same time, there's very many unique aspects that we need to understand to be able to address the problem that we're facing right now. And another challenge is that wicked problems are one-shot operations. So when we're talking about combating climate change, we take a shot and we hope for that one to be the right one. Because again, we can't go back in time and try again, try a different approach. We don't know which approach will be the best, and this goes for energy policy as well. We don't yet know which policies will be the best in the long term, but we still have to take some level of action. And so, I've given you an outline of some of the complexities that are involved in environmental issues. And now, of course, you understand that if environmental issues are complex and challenging, that also means that environmental education is complex and challenging. So, for instance, in Finland, environmental issues are something that teachers are, by law, by the syllabus, they have to teach about environmental issues. Just some quotes from the Finnish syllabus. It says that education should help students understand the role of chemistry or physics or whatever the subject they're studying in building a sustainable future. So sustainable development is strongly present in the new curriculum in Finland. Furthermore, education directs students to take responsibility of the environment. So as teachers, we actually have a big responsibility, because our responsibility is to teach the students to take responsibility. And also, education should provide students with skills to help in decision making and help them use knowledge and skills in different life situations. And of course, environmental issues are a big issue of today and tomorrow, so this is definitely something that we need to teach our students to make decisions in. So, in essence, education isn't only about giving students an occupation or giving them background information for occupation, but we're actually creating future citizens or helping students grow into future citizens. So there's a lot of aspects that we need to teach them. Of course, understand critical thinking and be able to understand these complex issues, because our students will be the ones who will be voting on some of these challenging issues in the future. So education shouldn't be only about the vocational issues, but we also need to incorporate it in society, as well as bring individual aspects, students' personal interests into play in education. And so when we look at environmental education, or even just climate change education, it's easy or tempting to think that, well, when we provide the students with knowledge, that will lead them to be more environmentally cautious, they will have more positive attitudes towards the environment, and that will eventually lead them to take environmental actions. Unfortunately, this is not the case. When we look at environmental behavior, there's a lot of aspects that affect our behavior. Of course, time is one. If we don't find the time to take an environmental action, we won't take it. Money is another. We often choose the cheaper solution, even though we know that it's not as environmentally friendly as the more expensive solution. Also, social pressure is one. So depending on how the student's parents, the teacher, how their peers see environmental issues, that's also strongly how they're going to see environmental issues and environmental behavior. If among the students there's a trend to take your bike to school, more and more students will start doing that, whereas if that's something considered not cool, students won't ride their bikes to school. Then there's also issues related to values, empathy, altruism. Some students and some people have more of a tendency to help other people around them. And this is what environmental issues are primarily about. understanding that my actions will affect someone else's actions. And when a student understands that, that may help them take more environmental friendly actions. For some that will be the case, but for others it won't. Then of course there's values that come from home and from school and from friends and so forth, and even just empathy, which is quite similar to what I just said about altruism. And then finally, the possibility of to act will make a difference on whether students and people in general actually take environmental actions or not. In Finland, we know that taking public transportation in Helsinki is very easy, and that is why people use it. Recycling in Finland is also very easy, and that's why people recycle. But there's other behaviors that aren't made so easy by society, and so they're not taken as readily as these actions are. So, as an educator, I guess the biggest challenge is that students, they're just different, and you already know this, of course, but this is also the case in environmental education. The students have different reasons to act or not to act. They come from different backgrounds, meaning that their knowledge in, let's say, climate change can be very different depending on how these issues are talked at in home, how much they read the media, and so forth. So the students in any class are a very heterogeneous group. So then when we really come to the solutions, or not even the solutions, but just sort of closing on what I think that a teacher should take into consideration in education when addressing environmental issues is, well, as I just mentioned, remember that students are very different, and really do take this into consideration in how you plan your lessons. If possible, maybe you can have your students work in different groups. They have different interests, even within a specific theme such as climate change. Students have a wide range of interests. Some might be more interested to know how environmental issues will affect their society, whereas others are more interested to know how scientists have actually come up with the results that we know and that we use to make future predictions and so forth. So even there's a lot of differences among students. And then again, holistic thinking is key in environmental education. A teacher cannot just focus on their own subject, but they really have to understand also how their subject and how that specific environmental theme, whether it would be acid rain or climate change or energy use, how is that theme related to the bigger picture of society? And here it would be great if you could do collaboration work with other teachers who are teaching a similar theme but looking at it from a different perspective. I'm sure the collaboration could be very fruitful. And also, don't accept simple truths, not from yourself and not from the students, because simple truths, they don't really carry us that far. For instance, a big trend is that people recycle. People recycle in Finland, people recycle around the world, and I think recycling is great. But when we look at the whole picture, when we look at, let's say, climate change, recycling is only a very, very small proportion of the whole environmental impact that we're making. So if we focus on simple truths and simple actions, we're actually misleading our students to understand the whole picture and understand the complexity of some of the issues we're dealing with. And of course, as teachers, we need to use our expertise in reading our students and understanding at what level can we discuss these complex issues, but we shouldn't also be afraid to expose the complexity of these issues completely. And also, it's important to remember that knowledge is needed, but it is not enough. There's a lot of emotional aspects that teachers need to deal with, ethical aspects, values, and so forth, and these should all be a part of the discussion, classroom discussion, when talking about environmental issues. And then, of course, there's critical thinking, something that I'm sure all of us teachers really want to see and experience in our students, and it is very important, but at the same time we need to understand that critical thinking in itself is not enough. We need to understand the urgency of some of the issues that we're facing, and a good question to ask is to think, well, if we're not sure whether climate change is happening, what could be the worst thing that we could do by taking action? You get my drift? There's things that we can do that don't really cost us that much time or money, but that they will be still beneficial for the environment and for future generations, whether climate change is happening or not. And just so you don't think that I'm a climate change skeptic, let's remember that also about 97% of the scientists working in the field believe that climate change is human-induced, which also means that humans can affect it positively but also negatively. And the same issue goes with all environmental issues, as I keep on repeating. So let's remember the urgency. We have to do something now already. We might not yet know what the best thing is to do, but starting to take action is key. And of course, along the process, we need to analyze those actions, and we can make pivots. We can change the things that we're doing. So yeah, critical thinking also goes a long way here. To close and to sum up, I think this image really says what I was trying to say along the last slide. So what if the environmental issues such as climate change aren't really that big of a problem? What's going to happen? Well, even if we take societal steps to combat these issues, there's going to be a lot of good coming out of it. And here in this picture you can see a list of some of the positive aspects that will happen when societies come together and really try to combat climate change, and by doing so really changing their energy policy, how they see energy efficiency, how they produce their energy, and so forth. Thank you.